Under the burning, a soft broke the silence of the savannah, drawing attention to its source. Carefully, an old woman alone followed the sound through the tall grass, each step making her heart faster. When the grass opened, a little trembling appeared, its fur as white as the clouds and its eyes full of fear. For a moment, everything seemed frozen, as the old woman kneeled and slowly out a hand, the air full of anticipation. What had started as a simple walk was soon to something extraordinary. The sun lay low on the vast savannah, coloring the cracked and dry of a golden far away. High baobabs proudly their thick and twisted rising towards the sky as silent protectors. At the edge of this empty land was a small hut made of mud and straw. The hut leaned slightly, like tired of having resisted so many years to the burning, and the strong this little house belonged to Nanesha, a widow who lived alone for a long time. Nanesha, out of her hut, her back slightly bent by age and hard labor. She wore a simple fabric on her shoulders, and held a basket braided in her hands, rough and wrinkled. Her eyes, marked with many lines by a life of struggle, watched the horizon with a determination. The village near Baobab was lively and very different from Nana Asia's. She didn't often. After losing her family during a terrible drought, years she had chosen to live alone. Barefoot, Nana Asia slowly on unequal ground, sometimes to pick up dry and twigs that she put in her basket. The only sounds were the distant of birds and the soft murmur of the grass under the breeze, reminding her that despite everything, life continued to prosper in the wild. Even though her life was lonely and difficult, Nanesha remained strong. For a moment, she stood up, adjusting her basket on her hip, and looked back towards her little hut. A simple but peaceful she called her home. The sun was low in the sky, covering the savannah of a soft slowly. Through this open land her basket was already half full of dry branches and branches. She stopped to rest, wiping the sweat off her forehead with the corner of her shawl. It was then that she heard a noise. First was a faint sound barely noticeable above the light wind. She stopped and bowed her head. Carefully then he came back, a faint and trembling like that of a baby in distress. Her heart accelerated as she was scouting the grass and the trees and spruce. Tightly her walking Nanesha followed the sound. Carefully on the dry and cracked the screams became stronger. Drawing deeper into the wild she spread out the herbs. And suddenly lying on the ground, little Trembling was there. Its fur was white as clouds, contrasting vividly with the brown and green of the savannah. The tiny creature trembled, and the breath of Nanesha stopped. It was a baby albino. Its big, frightened shone with tears. The little baby let another soft and desperate, his little hands stretching out the air. For something or someone. She slowly kneeled, taking care not to frighten the little animal. "Oh, my poor little one," she said gently, his voice calm and tender, like a mother speaking to her child. "Why are you here alone?" The baby jumped over and retreated into the grass, his little body stretched by fear. He did rush. She remained still and silent, moving only as slowly as a breeze. She stretched her hand out, showing that she was a threat. "Everything is fine," she in a calming. After a while, the baboon stopped trembling so much. His curious studied the face of Nanesha, as if he were for an insurance. Slowly, his trembling little hand stretched out and touched his fingers. A warm smile spread over Nanesha's. With caution, she picked up the delicate creature, it gently in her arms. He was so light, his little body barely noticeable. His soft resembled silk under his rough hands. She held against her, licking him like a baby, need of comfort. "You are safe now," the baby baboon blotted against his chest. His tears subsiding and small tired Nanesha felt a deep in her. A sensation she had not known for many years. Equilibring his basket on a handle, and firmly the tiny baboon in his arms, Nanesha began to walk towards her hut. As she walked, she spoke softly to little being, her voice filled with love and hope. "I will call you Timo," she whispered gently. "You will, my little hope." Time passed, and the little fragile baboon that Nanesha had saved became a companion full of life. At first, Timo was shy and always close to her. He hung on to his shawl, or sat quietly by his side while she was baskets. But over the days and weeks, he became more courageous. His curious eyes began to explore every corner of the hut, and soon he followed Nanesha everywhere she went. A cold while Nanesha was going out to pick up the wood for Timo, jumped behind her with excitement. His white shone under the sun, He copied each his gestures, picking up small sticks and placing them carefully in his basket. Nanasia burst into her voice resonating through the savannah. "You are such smart little assistant," she said, smiling gently her soft head. Timo shouted little joyfully before starting, looking with enthusiasm for other brindles. Over the months and years, Timo grew, becoming stronger and stronger. His thin arms became muscular, and his small body stretched up. Even though he had much taller, Timo remained soft and playful, always careful not to hurt Nanasia. Timo quickly became his best assistant. He carried heavy wooden effortlessly, climbed up an abyss to collect delicious sweet, and brought water from the stream into a clay, keeping it perfectly. One day, while Nanasia was working on his baskets, Timo tying branches with a rope. Applauding with joy, Nanasia exclaimed, "Timo, you learned." Her face shone with pride. Timo smiled, raising his eyes sparkling, proud of his progress. The other time quiet girl was now filled with laughter and energy. Timo animated every corner of his playful. He loved to swing at the branches of the tree near their house, his shiny against the green. Often, he suddenly to ground to surprise Nanasia, shaking his finger, but always up laughing. Timo's amazed him. He seemed to understand not only his words but also his feelings. When Nanasia was tired, he sat down his side and gently his big hand on his shoulder, as if to say, "I am here." The days when sadness invaded his heart, Timo was making funny or shooting his shawl until she found her smile again. For Nanasia, Timo was just an animal. He was his family, his companion, the light that once his life. Their simple lives brought him happiness that they had not felt for many years. But as Timo grew up, rumors began to circulate in the neighboring. Those who perceived the huge white whispered among them, "He is too big," said some, uncomfortable. "No animal should become as huge." The murmured, "It is not natural, perhaps he is cursed." Nanasia ignored the comrades. She knew the truth. For her, Timo was not a curse, he was a gift, his miracle. Nothing else mattered. One evening, while the sun was painting the sky with orange and violet, Nanasia looked at Timo happily at the branches of the trees. His joy illuminated the twilight. "You are special, Timo," she said gently, knowing full of love and pride. No one deny it. Timo's size and intelligence amazed Nanasia, but the news of the unusual spread quickly throughout the village of Kora. People talked about his strength, his stature, and even rumors according to which he understood the language. One day, Nanasia decided to go to the village. She rarely left her house, but she needed provisions that she could not harvest herself. Timo walked by her. His silhouette was and attracted the eyes everywhere he went. When they arrived at the happy of the crowd gradually faded away. The villagers turned around to look at, and a heavy silence settled. The mothers held their children against them, and the men exchanged worried, "It's the white baboon," everyone is, whispered a woman. "It's not normal," another one with a trembling voice. Timo noticed the scary and tightened his grip on the basket, slightly his Nanasia gently his arm. "Don't worry, Timo," they simply understand you. But his comforting could not prevent the tension to around them. When Nanasia approached a fruit, the seller quickly away, face pale. You can't stay here," he said with a trembling voice, his nervous eyes on Timo. "This thing has no place in the village." Nanasia brushed her eyebrows and answered firmly, "It's one thing. It's Timo. He's part of my family." The seller shook head, refusing to look her. Around them, the murmurs intensified. "It's a bad omen. Someone, and if he hurt someone," added another. Timo was uncomfortable, feeling fear and mistrust in the crowd. His confused eyes turned towards Nanasia. Silently her, "What to, let's go home," said Nanasia calmly. Although his voice carries a note of sadness, keeping his head high, she turned around and moved away. Timo followed her closely, trying to look smaller. As he left the market, the murmurs of the villagers continued. Their whispers soon wild. Some said they saw Timo lifting heavy logs as if they weighed nothing. Others claimed to have heard produce sounds similar to a human voice. At end of week, and suspicion had distorted the truth. Certain village people started calling Timo a evil spirit, or a disguised. "He is too smart for an animal," said an old man. "A creature like him should not exist." When the season arrived, the savannah was burned by the unbreakable Nanasia, who had always been strong despite her age, began to weaken. At first it was difficult to notice. She moved more slowly and needed more rest. But soon, Even small tasks like cutting baskets or picking up wood became too difficult for her. One morning, while Timo was a bunch of branches to their hut, Nanasia trembled and dropped her basket. She leaned against a tree, her breath short and heavy. Timo rushed to his side, gently his shoulder. "I'm just tired, Timo," she said gently, trying to smile despite her pain. "I'm going to fine," but Timo saw the truth. His hands, once stable and strong, were now. His steps were slow and uncertain. Over the following days, Nanasia remained in the hut, too weak to get out. Timo took care of his daily. He picked up wood, brought water from the stream, and even to cook, although his big hands were hard with the small tasks. Every night, he sat at Nanasia's, his eyes worried, watching over her. One night, a sky full of stars, Nanasia stretched her hand and took that of Timo. His touch was soft, and his skin seemed fresh. "You were so good to me, Timo," she in weak voice. "I am so proud of you." Timo leaned his head, his eyes shining, looking for his, as if he were for an explanation. He pushed a light sound, supplicating answers. "I'm getting my boy," she laughing softly. "My time is almost up." Timo shook his head, refusing to accept. He leaned closer, pressing his forehead against his hand. He could not imagine life without her. The only person who took care of him, who showed him love when no one else had done it. Next morning, Nanasia's worsened. Her breathing was weak, and her voice was nothing more than a murmur. Timo stayed by her side, holding his little hand in hers, as if his only presence could give him strength. At noon, Timo realized that he couldn't help her alone. He needed someone who could help him. "Be careful, my boy," his voice as light as a gust of wind carried him far away. Before Timo left to seek help, Nanasia felt his strength fade away. Lying on his straw, his tired body trembled slightly under the weight of the years. She raised one weak hand towards Timo, who immediately approached, big golden, seeking an explanation for this sudden fragility. She gently his face off his fingers. "You are a good boy," Timo murmured, a tender on edge of lips. He bowed head, pressing gently his forehead against his hand, a gesture he often when he sought comfort. "Go, my child, don't waste time." His voice was soft but firm. Timo hesitated, his gaze oscillating between the door and Nanasia. He didn't to her alone. Something in him was to stay. But she closed her eyes for a moment and offered him last glance, filled with pride and love. "I'll wait for you." These words decided it. With a last glance at her, without hesitation, Timo rushed to the village, desperate to save the only family he had known. But as he moved away, Nanasia lay in her bed, her heavy of exhaustion. The little hut became silent. Only the gentle sound of the wind passing through the window remained. Timo ran towards the village, his powerful moving rapidly. His white shone under the sun, making easily visible as he crossed the golden. As he approached the village, the usual of everyday life stopped. A woman carrying vegetables moved her eyes, growing in fear. Children playing with sticks dropped their toys and ran to theirs. The white someone shouted. Timo slowed down and raised his hands, trying to show that he was not dangerous. He made soft whispers, hoping that the villagers would, but all he saw was his large size and his unusual color. Fear filled their hearts.